Hey, it's 3.3, Polishing the Higher Level Essay. Lesson objective: students will be able to write very clear, error-free language in an appropriate register and style. So we're focusing on criterion D language, and the question you're going to be asking is, how do I score high on criterion D? Here is what you want. You want to score a 5, and they do actually sometimes award 5s for criterion D. So here's what you have to do in order to get a 5. Language is very clear, effective, carefully chosen, and precise, with a high degree of accuracy in grammar, vocabulary, and sentence construction. Register and style are effective and appropriate to the task. So let me give you some tips on how you can do this, how you can score a 5. The first tip is to read it out loud like this kitty is doing. It's the best way to catch anything awkward, especially if you're reading it out loud to someone else. It's just a really good habit to do. You find more things the more you read things out loud. And slow down and actually read the sentences that are there on the screen instead of what you were thinking in your head. Look at what is there, because that's all the assessor is going to know. You'll find those awkward sentences as you're reading out loud, and then you'll fix them up, revise them. The best writers are tireless revisers. So you're going to be constantly revising. All right. How can you make your writing more precise and clear? Well, let me give you some tips. First of all, make each sentence work. What do I mean when I say that? Well, first of all, avoid to be passive verbs. Use active verbs in your language. Get rid of any repeating words. If you're saying something more than once in a sentence, get rid of it. How about filtering devices? I'll talk more about those in a second, but get rid of filtering devices. You guys use them a lot, which it's really common, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about how to get rid of those in a sec. All right, so let's take a look at an example. Here's a long paragraph from a student from the Things They Carried essay, and it goes like this. He also seems to be talking directly to the readers as he says, "It's time to be blunt. I'm 43 years old and I'm a writer now," making us think that this is the real Tim O'Brien. Right here now, as I invent myself, I'm thinking of all I want to tell you about why the book is written as it is. O'Brien then tells us what he tells us certain things a certain way, that he tells us certain things a certain way, because he wants us to feel what I felt, to know why story truth is truer sometimes than happening truth. This gives a deeper expansion and answer to why Tim O'Brien includes tricks throughout his novel, to show us that anything can be made real as long as it feels real, and that is exactly what O'Brien does. All right, so they made a lot of really good points. They have some well-integrated quotes, but it's pretty wordy. There's extra words in here that aren't working, so let's tackle those and get rid of them. First of all, we have a passive verb, to be talking. We don't need the to be, and usually when to be is in your essays, you could take it out and have a much more active, precise, and effective sentence. And so if you take a look at this, just to talk directly to the reader is a much more concise way to say that sentence. All right, how about repeating words? Well, here he repeats because he's trying to explain that, O'Brien is telling us that he tells us certain things in a certain way. Like, I understand what he's getting at. It just doesn't make for a very effective sentence in an academic essay. And so I think you could just change it to O'Brien then explains. I think it's going to be more concise. Make your point in other ways besides repeating words. This one is a filtering device. This gives a deeper expansion and answer to why Tim O'Brien includes tricks throughout his novel. They're not really saying anything here. They're saying, well, this is what is done in order to make it make sense, or in order to make it deeper, or, there's not the actual idea, the why. He says, it gives a deeper expansion and an answer to why, but he doesn't actually say why O'Brien is doing this. And what is this anyway? So it's a pretty ineffective sentence. I tried rewriting it, and I came up with this. Here, O'Brien explains the crucial idea that truth is not what happened, but what one feels. And then when I keep reading, I notice that the next sentence doesn't really fit then with what I've changed, to show us that anything can be made real as long as it feels real, and that is exactly what O'Brien does. It's not super effective anyway, but now that I've changed this sentence, it really doesn't work. So I tried changing that one too, and I came up with, as a writer, O'Brien creates story truths to make the reader feel what happened, since the feeling itself is truer than any actual event. So the revised paragraph looks like this. He also seems to talk directly to the readers as he says, "It's time to be blunt. I'm 43 years old and I'm a writer now, making us think that this is the real Tim O'Brien. Right here now as I invent myself, I'm thinking of all I want to tell you about why the book is written as it is." O'Brien then explains he wants the reader to feel what I felt, to know why story truth is truer sometimes than happening truth, both on 171. Here, O'Brien explains the crucial idea that truth is not what happened, but what one feels. As a writer, O'Brien creates story truths to make the reader feel what happened, since the feeling itself is truer than any actual event. So it's a shorter paragraph, it's more precise, and it's argued more effectively, I think. Okay, so that's an example of how to make your writing more concise and precise and effective, okay? Filtering devices, there's another section in your packet to write about these, so you could jot some of these down. I see these filtering devices a lot, and they just simply aren't needed. You can just totally delete them. This quote shows that you don't need those words. Instead, talk about the actual word that is showing something. Focus on the idea that's created, the feeling that's created. My thesis statement is, you don't need to say that. Just cross it off. Just make the point instead. This blank connects to blank because, so maybe you were thinking about these when you first started making sense of the book, but now that you have a claim that you're arguing, you're going to get rid of these extra words and make your argument and keep it precise. Kind of is a filtering device. You don't need it. It either is or it isn't. An example of this authorial choice is, you don't even need that. You don't need the word authorial choice. Use the name of the pattern that you've been tracing instead. This is an example of the authorial choice because, again, a lot of filtering devices that just simply aren't needed here. Okay, how can I avoid errors in my writing is the next question. Well, the number one thing to do, you know already, is read, reread, and reread some more. Watch for the underlines from Google. Use AI. 3.3 Step 2 explains how to do this specifically. And then get a proofreader. If you know somebody who's great at finding errors, enlist their help. Here is an example of a paragraph that has errors in it. And we're going to take a look at all of the different errors, okay? Here's the paragraph. The narrator in the chapter, The Man I Killed, of the Things They Carried, misleads the reader with a false story about Tim's killing of a man. The story is revealed to be false in the chapter Good Form, with its purpose being to show the guilt experienced by the veterans simply for their presence. So this is the paragraph that I want you to write down, and then we're going to make corrections to it. So just take a moment and write it down now. Did you write it down? Pause now if you haven't. All right, now that you've written it down, let's take a look at the problems with this paragraph. Okay, here are the different problems that I've spotted, and we're going to look at each one as we go. And these all have to do with little nitpicky things, stuff that I did not check in your first 3 essays. I just simply didn't correct them. Now is the time, once you get your revision back, to check for these things, okay? So the very first yellow, what is it? Well, we got to indent because this is the beginning of a paragraph. So we indent the paragraph by hitting tab on the keyboard. The next one, we need to use quotes for titles of chapters. The Man I Killed is the name of a chapter, and so we need to have quotation marks around it. Oh, you know what? This K should be capitalized too. I just noticed that. That's wrong there as well. The next error, the things they carried, is the name of the larger work, and we have to underline or italicize titles of larger works. So I've underlined it here. The next error is another name of a chapter, good form. So we have to capitalize chapter titles and use quotation marks. The next problem with its purpose being to, we got a filtering device there. We have words that aren't working. And so we could just simply change that to showing and make it much more precise. The last problem has to do with the capitalization of V in veterans. It's not actually a proper noun, so it doesn't need to be capitalized. So the paragraph correct would look like this. So go ahead and correct your paragraph now. All right, tips to use a formal academic register in the essay. First of all, avoid personal pronouns, I, me, you, and your. Avoid using abbreviations like ETC, AKA. Don't call the author by their first name ever. The author is O'Brien. If you're talking about the character Tim, you can call him Tim. But if you're talking about the writer, you're going to call him O'Brien. Avoid slang, stuff like kind of. Flat out states. What do you say instead of flat out states? Explicitly states. Instead of something being pretty uncertain, it's just uncertain. You don't need pretty. Don't reference the examiner. So you're not going to want to say, hey, examiner, I hope you really like my essay. Tips to use varied language to show off your writing skills. Use different sentence structures. Shake it up. Sometimes start with a word ending with ly, an adverb, and then write the rest of your sentence. Use the 3+ syllable word only if you know it. The examiners are going to know the word well. So unless you know the word, use something else. The 3-syllable plus word isn't going to impress anyone if you're not using it correctly. Name literary devices always. Alliteration, juxtaposition, imagery, personification, analogy, metaphoric language, anything that you see. And of course, these go on and on and on and on. And the more you use, the better. Repeat the name of the literary aspect. And so whatever pattern it is you're tracing, repeat it. Use that like an anchor or a signpost, and continually come back to it in the same way that the Frederick Douglass essay used comparisons of animals to humans or humans to animals. They used that label over and over again, didn't they? And that's effective. You don't want to change the label. You don't want to come up with new words for that label. Just use the same label. These are some that we looked at, right? Weight and things carried, motif, non-chronological and fragmented structure, misleading and changing narrator for the things they carried. Repeat the rich idea once again. Avoid coming up with new ways to describe it. Use the same language like a signpost or an anchor to help the reader follow your argument. Tips to use MLA style for the essay. Use the literary present tense always. So O'Brien leaves for the border, not O'Brien left for the border. Times New Roman Arial or Calibri 12 point. 1-inch margins are used. 1 space after periods instead of 2 spaces. Indent the first line of each paragraph using the tab key on the keyboard. Double space by clicking line and paragraph spacing and choose double either before you start typing or after you typed by highlighting all of the typed writing first. Spell out numbers that can be written in 1 or 2 words like 3, 15, 76, 1,000, 12 billion, and use numerals for other numbers like 2 3/4, 584, etc. I think, do I have one more for you? Oh, I think that is all. So those are tips for Criterion D. And, go through, take a look at the Desmos and Schoology next to look at how to use AI correctly. And then you can use AI to help you get rid of some of the little errors. Try the Mastery Check in Schoology to see how well you can spot and correct errors. Thanks.